I pretty much told him, how much do you want from me? Name your price. I probably would have paid almost anything to have had a book, to have had a resource with this knowledge and information to help me flourish in the classroom. I wish I would have had it. Welcome to the podcast.
Welcome to the Urban and Educating Podcast, where it's all about learning the best strategies for classroom management, student engagement, and living your best life as a game-changing educator. Here's your host, Dr. Sean Woodley.
Greetings and salutations. I'm your host, Dr. Sean Woodley, and welcome to episode 2 of the Urban and Educating Podcast. What exactly is it that I can do to take my teaching to the next level? What exactly is it that I can do to really position myself to flourish in the classroom? These are questions that need answers. And that's what we're discussing today in this episode with Mr. Jason McNeil. He's a master educator out of the Washington, D.C. area who walks us through his story and how he went from literally 0 to 100 and flourishing in the classroom. Now, make no mistake, this was not an easy journey for Jason, and he got started in a very unusual way. But he had a lot of learning experiences that happened along that journey that he's sharing with us today to help you take your teaching to the next level and fast track your growth as an educator. But to get the background, we started from the beginning. So I wanted to know a little bit more about Jason, where he came from, where he went to school, and how he got started on his journey to accept his calling.
Originally hailing from upstate New York, the capital, Albany. I attended Hampton.
What school?
That was Hampton.
Okay.
Real HU.
Yes,
Hampton
sir.
University. From 1995 to 99 as an undergraduate, and from 99 to 2002 as a graduate student.
Awesome there.
And you know, just out of respect and acknowledgement of my Master's of Arts in Teaching, I did receive that from the other HU, Howard University.
Oh yeah, you gotta show love. And there's nothing
Absolutely.
wrong with that at all.
HBCU love, word to Harvey.
HBCU love, word to Harvey. Tell us, so like while you were at Hampton, what did you study there?
My bachelor's degree is in physics and my master's is in computer science.
Got you. So now with having a background in physics and computer science, where did teaching come into that?
Well, initially I pursued physics because of a love for math that I developed through elementary, middle school, and high school. I had an outstanding physics teacher in high school who extended an opportunity to me to take the AP class to receive my college credits for Intro to Physics. And I was fortunate enough to receive a full ride to Hampton in pursuit of a physics degree. The scholarship that I received was the SIM scholarship, and it was geared towards attracting African-American students to areas of science: math, computer science, biology, chemistry, and physics. I chose physics because I just really saw physics as the embodiment of math in word problems. It was just really a series of word problems. So I sought that as my major. And through that time, I realized my main love for math was really in problem solving. So when physics started to become, when we got into our core classes and physics started to become more theoretical, I saw my love for that particular major start to wane a bit. So I was, again, fortunate enough when I graduated to be extended the opportunity to continue my research for one of my physics professors, but align it to the computer science curriculum for my master's, because I felt at that point I would be more marketable with a master's in computer science and could pursue that as a career avenue.
Okay.
But, the unfortunate thing was computer science is a master's, and the master's program focused more so on the theoretical aspect of computer science versus coding.
Okay.
So it didn't really position me in the manner that I hoped and anticipated that it would. So when I moved to Washington, D.C., and I was trying to identify the career path that I was going to follow, I took up a part-time position as a SAT prep tutor.
Mm-hmm.
And from that point, I was extended the opportunity by the counselor, who really appreciated the way that I was able to connect with the kids. She really wanted this to be something more beneficial for me. So versus being paid $20 an hour for the courses that I, facilitated on the weekends, she wanted to cut out the company that I was working for and extend full payment and the opportunity to facilitate the whole program myself.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was a great opportunity, but it wasn't really going to put me in a financial position to remain in the area. So she also put me in contact with her former employer, who ran a level 5 residential facility for at-risk, emotionally disturbed youth in Southeast DC. And so that was the first door open to me as an educator.
Got it.
And I was a general ed teacher there, working under him because he was certified as a special education teacher. So that's how my journey into education began. It was something, honestly, that I truly fought. I felt this generation of kids were very entitled and not disciplined as, the students I was familiar with growing up and going to school with. And I felt teachers were underpaid for the amount of work that they had to do. So I truly fought going in the direction of education. But at the end of the day, your calling is your calling.
You said it. You said it. Can't fight
it. You can't fight it. No matter how hard I tried to run away from it, nothing was panning out for me in the way that I wanted it to until I started teaching.
Now, what's interesting here is that regardless of what Jason tried to do, regardless of the direction that he tried to go, the classroom kept calling him back. Tried to go one way, wasn't happy. Tried to go another way, wasn't feeling that fulfillment. Tried to go another way, miserable. Everything kept pointing him and leading him back to his true calling of being in the classroom. He goes on to tell us about these experiences and how he even took a $27,000 pay cut
from commission work.
Mm-hmm.
And I took a severe pay cut. I took about a $27,000 pay cut.
Wow.
And, again, like I said, when you try to walk away or run away from what you're called to do, it's not going to be an easy feat. No matter how hard you try, it's not going to benefit you in the manner that you want. And it's also not going to be as rewarding.
Absolutely.
As it is to be an educator. I'm a hands-on person. I dealt with students on a day-to-day basis. So to go from that environment to sitting at a desk in an office at a cubicle all day for 10 hours was a great change. Mm-hmm. But and again, the opportunity to make very good money was there. But in the end, it just didn't give me personally what I needed that I received from being an educator. It wasn't face-to-face interaction on a regular basis. It wasn't the smile in a child's face when you see them win.
It's golden. It's golden, man. You can't replace that. Absolutely.
You can't replace that. So, yet again, I'm being drawn back into education, but now my grind is a bit more focused.
Sure.
At the end of the day, you can greatly impact a child as an educator in the classroom and change the world. But I really want to see myself now in a position as an administrator, and open my own charter school to cultivate the educators to then impact that many more students.
Absolutely. Make that impact exponential. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
So now help us out here. I know that you are a very resourceful educator. Talk to us about what it was like in the beginning stages before you had the ability and found out where to get these resources to help you save time and to make your job just a little bit easier. What was it like before that in the beginning?
Flat out, transparent and honest, it was terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't, I didn't earn my master's of arts in teaching until I was well into my career.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't have the education background, the education, experience as an educator or the formal teaching.
Okay.
As an educator, since that wasn't, either the degrees that I initially sought and earned.
So, and I don't want to interrupt you, but I think that's important because there are a lot of people such as yourself and maybe even career switchers who have or discover that they might have that knack for teaching and want to give back and come into the classroom on that sort of a preliminary or trial basis kind of sort of while they're earning that degree part-time at night or so forth. So is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I mean, at the end of the day, when, to know your content is to know your content, but to know your content and then deliver your content are two different
things. You said it.
And I can even relate that to, at Hampton, I was definitely afforded the opportunity to work with some very renowned physicists, and they worked at Jefferson Labs in Newport News. So they definitely were hands-on in their experience, but it took a different caliber of a professor to really convey and bring to life the content in a way that a student can understand it. And that was one of the difficulties that I faced. I really did not know how to write a lesson plan. I wasn't required to write lesson plans in the beginning of my career, just in the working in a level 5 residential facility it was not your traditional school.
Right.
Working in my first charter school, that lesson plans were not mandated. So it was more so me walking into the classroom and teaching off the cuff.
Off the cuff, just making it up.
Just faking it till you make it.
That's it.
And really going as you move forward. But the thing that you learn is that students can identify very quickly when you're prepared and when you're not.
Man, listen.
And when you're not prepared, it can make your day as an educator that much more difficult, because a teacher's day is never the same day to day. It's unpredictable. It has a life of its own. You can walk into the building and within 5 minutes find yourself in a teaching moment and not be expecting that at all. So early on, it was difficult just because I was not aware of how to plan. I was not aware of resources that were available to me. I mean, even in the level 5 facility that I worked in, the textbooks that they were using were the exact same textbooks I was using in high school. So you can imagine how many years removed from high school I was at that point, having gone to a 4-year university, then and getting my 4-year degree and then getting my master's 3 years after that. These textbooks obviously were well outdated. And there wasn't a whole lot of continuity in the materials that they did have available to them. And it again just made it challenging. If the material is outdated and you really don't know how to use the material so that you can reach a child where they are, it's going to make it challenging. You're going to have those days where you just want to throw your hands up and just, because you're frustrated and what impact am I really making? How am I really getting across to these kids? Am I cultivating their desire to learn, or am I talking over their head?
Right.
Am I hitting all of the points that I need to hit? Am I leaving out anything? So these were questions that I had. And again, I still really was not accepting that this was what I was supposed to do. I really saw it as a transition, point in my career. And this was just something for right now. And it wasn't what I was going to do long term. I still tried to have one foot at that point in the world of business, in the world of computer science, trying to still identify that opportunity. So I wasn't all the way in, and it just made it challenging, not being able to plan and not knowing the importance of how to differentiate your instruction,
man,
especially with the kids that I was working with, because it's level 5 facility. These kids range from ages of 14 to 21. And they were all on different playing fields as far as where they were academically and what they were capable of doing. I mean, my first day walking into this building, I had a young lady walk up to me, and she was 14 years old. And she said, "Are you going to be the teacher that's going to teach me how to read?" And it kind of took me back. And, these kids also had so many things going on just from their circumstance that was such a wall in front of them that prevented, it was such a hurdle. And that was another dynamic that I did not expect, because I just remember growing up, being fortunate enough to go to a private school for 8 years and then to a public high school, but I was already set at that point. I was already well prepared, and I was raised to be a go-getter. I took high school courses in middle school,
college courses in high school with the AP.
College courses, exactly. And in New York, we had the Regents
exams. Yes, sir.
So it wasn't, you had to show and prove. You could get A's all throughout the year, but if you did not pass your exam, you had to take that class again. So, the mindset that I had and the students, my peers that I associated with, we were all go-getters. We were all focused on getting out of what we called small-body at that time and trying to get into, the real world outside of Albany. We all wanted to experience that. So I also had a network at that point. These kids didn't have that.
Right.
They didn't have a team around them, a cohort, if you may. They didn't have that. So there was really no motivation. There was really nobody holding them accountable outside of myself. So, all of those things made it challenging as a first year teacher who was not trained traditionally to be a teacher.
Gotcha.
And, it kind of followed me for 2 or 3 years after that. And I believe it all sunk in for me once I started teaching at Howard University Middle School of Math and Science, the charter school on Howard's campus, when is really when I can say that I started to truly accept this was my calling. And this was about 4 years into teaching.
So let me ask you this. Is this around the time when you actually started to learn how to plan?
Yes.
Okay.
Because at this point now I was in a charter school, again, geared at promoting STEM, promoting young African-American students, minority students, because that was the primary population to really be excited about science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And I was surrounded by new teachers, old teachers on a historically black campus that were passionate about what they were doing. And it motivated me in a different way. We were like a family. There were a number of us that came in at the same time. There were actually 3 male teachers that came in at the same time in this school. And we considered ourselves the terrific 3 coming in.
Got you.
We identified each grade level. One was the 6th grade English teacher. I was the 7th grade math teacher. And the third one was the 8th grade history teacher. So we pretty much ran our floors.
Mm-hmm.
But the great thing about this school too, and it was something that I realized that was so critical in education and so critical in education for at-risk youth or for a demographic that has been quite often written off. The majority of the teachers in the school were male.
Oh, wow. You don't see that too often.
You don't see that too often. And I was blessed with that because, as a black male teacher, you're often sought after as the go-to when it comes to discipline. You're sought after as the go-to when it comes to the unruly boys, because they believe that you can make a connection. And that quite often will draw you out of the classroom and draw you away from your instruction.
Right.
Because then you start to put on the hat of the social worker, the counselor, the mentor, the father, the uncle, the big brother, whatever role it is that you play senior to these children, you start to be that person. So to be in a school where that expectation was spread over a number of other teachers, it allowed us to be a team, and we all communicated in how we approached the situation, and we established programs to foster what it was that we were trying to do in the classroom outside of the classroom. So that's when it all started to settle in. And while I was there was when I started to pursue my Master's of Arts in Teaching. So not only did I get the formal education at that time, I also had the experience and guidance of teachers that had been in the game and had the formal teaching background to really mentor me.
Got you.
So that right there is definitely something for first year teachers that is critical. Identify a mentor teacher, identify a veteran teacher that you can go to, a sounding board, somebody that you can pose questions to, somebody that you can run scenarios by to get a better idea of how to really tackle those issues that you're going to deal with, because it can be overwhelming. And if you're an invested teacher or you're just passionate about children, that alone taxes you physically, mentally, spiritually. So you need that cohort, that support around you of other teachers that can be empathetic and sympathetic to your plight, but still hold you accountable and still push you to raise the bar. So that was a critical time for me.
That village is critical that he mentioned about having that support unit around you and being intentional about who you place as your areas of influence in this industry. There's a theory that states we are the average of the 5 people with whom we spend the most time with. I mean, it makes sense. They're an influence on us. We're an influence on them. We feed off of one another. And I think that same thought process can be applied to us as educators. And think about this. Think about the 4 or 5 teachers that you spend the most time with. If you really think about it, it's very, very likely that their skill set is representative of your skill set and vice versa. So when you're choosing that village with whom you want to grow, look upward and make sure that you're modeling and being influenced by people who have strengths in the industry that you can learn from and feed off of to elevate yourself in what you do in the classroom every day. I then asked Jason to take a look back with the information that he came to find later in his career. If he could go back to his old self in the beginning when he was just flying blind out there as a teacher in the classroom, what advice, step by step, would he give to himself? How would you walk your old self through that?
Well, definitely the first thing I would say is accept your calling. Realize that. Because if you're not both feet in, you're not going to be an effective educator.
That's real.
So accept your calling is number 1. Number 2, as I said earlier, identify a veteran teacher to mentor you. Be very careful in your selection, though. You know, in your first year, you still kind of have to play the background and observe. You still have to, when you select a mentor in any industry, in any capacity, you have to be mindful, because it's like a relationship. It's like dating. People will have a mask on initially, but they could have alternative motives or ulterior motives in working with you. So you have to be able to really read the person, and you have to do your research on that person. You have to kind of probe around and do your fact finding.
Sure.
So definitely select a mentor, a veteran teacher to guide you. And the third thing I would tell my old self at that point was, do not try to fit your students now into the box that you remember yourself as a student.
Interesting.
My expectations for my kids were rooted in what I saw myself as a student.
Got you.
But not every child was fortunate enough, as I was, to have both parents in the household, to have a private school education and background. Granted, I faced my challenges in that setting as well. By all means, does private school, it does not mean exceptional.
No problems. Yeah.
Or no problems. You're going to still have your issues. I mean, I was the only black male in my class from 1st to 8th grade. So there was still issues that I had to face. There were still hurdles I had to overcome, stereotypes I had to push away and demonstrate I was the example, not the exception. I was the rule, not the exception. So, but at the end of the day, though, you cannot expect your students, especially this generation, to view education through the lens that I did. There's a lot of different factors that play into, a child now as a student that you have to be considerate of. So you have to make sure you don't box yourself into that expectation.
Absolutely.
Because if you do, then you're doing a disservice to your kids. You really have to realize where your kids are, realize their learning styles, be mindful of where they are academically, but also be sensitive to the environments that they come from. So, and then the fourth thing, there would be a fourth thing: keep a level head. Keep a level head, because how you talk to children, how you interact with children can make or break you as an educator as well. You have to be firm, but at the same time, you have to be flexible. You have to be understanding and mindful of, this is still a human that you're dealing with.
Absolutely.
Whether you are an authority figure to them or not, you have to be mindful. This is a person with feelings. This is a person with fears. This is a person that has dreams, and you have to cultivate those dreams. You have to teach them how to embrace their fears and see fear or failure as an opportunity to succeed.
I'm with you on that. You mentioned something specific, though, a minute ago. You said being firm but flexible with your students. Give me an example of what you mean by that, and maybe even put it into context for somebody who may not quite understand how firm you should be, or what is too firm, or how do you balance that, being firm but flexible?
Firm but flexible can be applied to different aspects of being a teacher. It can be applied to your classroom management. It can be applied to the academics in itself. So just for time's sake, I'll focus on those two. And classroom management, you have to be firm with your kids in setting a tone. And what I mean by that is, they have to know that you're not going to allow them to do what it is that they want to do.
Or they will.
Or they will. You
Yes.
give a child an inch, we all know they'll run 2-3 miles. And so you have to you have to set clear guidelines, but you have to be consistent. And I will say that again, with your classroom management, you have to be consistent, because if you are not consistent, those cracks in your foundation will start to make your days longer and harder than you want them to be.
You said
so
it.
You have to be very consistent with your kids. If you set guidelines, you have to stick to them as the adult as well. Your expectations for your kids to conduct themselves in a certain manner, you as the adult have to be the model and the example of that.
Model.
So you have to be level-headed. If you expect your children to be level-headed, you cannot engage in bullying, and teachers will deny that they do, but you really have to take an inventory of yourself and your actions to really see if that's the case, because you as a teacher can be a bully. And you cannot play that role. You have to be the disciplinarian, but at the same time, you have to be fair. And that's where the firm aspect comes in. The flexibility comes in when you realize that there are circumstances. Just as an adult, have a good day every day.
Right.
And you expect people to, as an adult, you expect people to be mindful of that. So you have to be mindful of that with a child. A child is not going to be on their A game every day.
Right.
They deal with circumstances at home as you do as an adult. And as a child, it can weigh on them harder than it does on you as an adult. So you have to be mindful of that as well. So that's where the firm and flexibility comes, just in regards to classroom management. You have to be mindful of that. As far as academics, we don't turn things in on time all the time either. So you can't expect your kids to be that way either. You have to again set the tone and set the expectation, but you have to be considerate of what they deal with. I've worked with plenty of kids who leave the school as a child and enter the home as an adult.
Right. Every day.
Every day.
Yeah.
They have to make sure that their siblings eat, that their homework is done. They play the part of the parent because in some cases their parents are working to make sure that the house is in order, and they're working 2 or 3 jobs to put food on the table and keep the lights on in the house. And unfortunately, there are those parents that just are not engaged. Certain populations that I've worked with, once the kid becomes a certain age, and that's primarily middle school, which I call those the most difficult years of a child, as far as growth and as far as education. But in middle school, they see them, once you transition to that age, you're an adult now. So you have to take the responsibilities of what they do. They shift that responsibility from being a parent to their oldest children.
Right.
And for kids, they may have the full intention to do the work, but they might have been overwhelmed by all of the work of their siblings that night. Yep. And then after helping them and then making sure everybody ate, took their baths, and then went to bed, they're tired, as an adult would be. And as adults and as parents, you have to recognize that that's the case. So if this is being placed on the small shoulders of a 13-year-old, 14-year-old child, you can only imagine if you're beat, they would be too.
That's it.
So you have to be flexible, and this comes in with knowing your kids.
That's it.
If you know your kids, you know the circumstances that they deal with. And then that's when you find a quality teacher will go the extra mile. They'll stay the extra half hour after school to give that child that time needed to complete a project. Or they'll see that a child has the weight of the world on their shoulders during an exam. And again, will either come early or stay late to give that child the extra time needed to kind of walk away and come back, because you know that child is capable, but the weight that they're carrying right now is too much.
I think what you mentioned there is so important, because in the last episode we spoke about getting to know your children in your classroom and how you get to do that. But then also, because of you doing that, you recognize when things are not right. And so you can make those adjustments and say, okay, I know this student normally does X, but today he's doing Y. Something isn't quite right here. Let me go ahead and be flexible and make that adjustment, or you've built that and established that rapport where you can ask him or her what's going on. They may not tell you in that moment, they may tell you in that moment, but you have enough rapport to get a better understanding of that student and what's going on in his or her circumstances, so you can adjust accordingly.
Absolutely.
Man. So now talk to us. You walked us through what it was like in the beginning and how you establishing these relationships and connections with your mentors and getting to know and understand your calling as an educator and what it's like to have gone through that, not understanding the pedagogy of teaching. And now talk to us about the other side of it now. So you've gotten the mentoring and you've gotten to the point where you understand the value of building relationships with your students. What is it like on the other side of that as an educator?
Well, first and foremost, you still got to be honest with yourself. Even as a teacher, no matter how many years of experience you have, it does become easier, but it never becomes a cakewalk. Let me be, 100 with that. Let's speak as the kids would. Let me keep it 100 with you in that aspect. But at the same time, though, it does open up the market for you to really see your growth as a teacher, and the impact that you have on your kids. It establishing, again, that cohort around you, that group of teachers that you can talk to, that you can bounce ideas off of. And it's important in middle school when the subjects are now taught not, I don't want to say in isolation, but it's, you have your math department, you have your science, it's departmental at this point. So now, but you still need to communicate to your team, because cross subject teaching is important. And it also drives home. And it helps for the information to stick when kids see how it relates to other subjects, or how something learned in one class can benefit them in another.
Yes.
So establishing that cohort does open up the market for higher order thinking and more effective teaching. So on the other side, once you really establish that support system, you now are open up to all of these resources that you can use across the board, even either from technology, from people telling you can go to Pinterest, teachers teach, just surf the web. You can identify lesson plans that you can then take and really adjust and change to suit the population that you teach. But at least you have the framework already established.
Right.
It's not, again, creating everything from scratch. It allows you to really now fine tune something that you found to fit your kids.
There's no reason to reinvent the wheel twice. No reason.
No reason whatsoever. It's as in anything in life, it's all about taking something that came last year and make it better. The best example you could look at is cell phones. Nobody's going back to the briefcase cell phone that you have to strap on your shoulder. We're not going back to that. It's all about how can we take what we did last year and make it better. And that's something teachers need to learn. Utilize the resources that you have. Like for us now, our grade books are electronic. Our communication is electronic. It's not what our teachers had to deal with. Not everything has to actually be pencil and paper. Open up the market to the resources that you have. And that even goes to, if you don't have the actual physical resources in your school, go online and see who you can apply to, what grants you can seek that'll give you the money to get the technology in your school that you feel is necessary, to get you the tablets, to get you the computers that you feel are necessary.
That's some awesome information right there. And I don't think enough people consider that.
Yeah, absolutely. The money is there. Even if you can't find a grant, you will be surprised at the number of people that'll contribute to a GoFundMe.
Yeah.
Money is there. So look, take every step that you can to identify the resources. First and foremost, always start with in your school and work your way out, because sometimes you don't have to look any further than the teacher down the hall.
I'll tell you this, it reminds me of kind of when I was first learning about just that whole concept of learning from people around me. And I was a thief. I was stealing shamelessly. If I saw a technique that you used to teach something or to a classroom management strategy, best believe I was putting it in my pocket right then and there. And then I would take it and make it work for me how it did. Because at the end of the day, it's all about the end result of increasing this student achievement.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
Taking the time to observe your colleagues is important.
Yes.
Co-teaching is important. I know one of my greatest experiences was the first time I got to co-teach a 6th grade math class. And the teacher that I worked with, she was traditionally, her education was in art.
Mm-hmm.
She really wanted to be an art teacher, and she was certified as an art teacher, but found her way into the classroom as a middle school science and math teacher. Then just eventually math, when they started to break down the 6th grade, they put us together one year, and I was more content heavy, but she was more of the creative side.
Okay.
I mean, this woman could walk into the classroom and create five stations of work in a matter of 20 minutes. And I mean, would sit there, broad marker, and create all the supplies like in front of me. And I was amazed at her ability to do that. But then she would also lean on me when it came to really dissecting content and breaking it down.
Got it.
Scaffolding that information so that the kids could really get it. So the two of us working together were like Batman and Robin.
That sounds like a dynamic duo, right? That's exactly what I was about to say.
It was a great team effort. Whatever I envisioned or I needed material-wise or visual-wise for the kids, she could create it. Whatever she needed content-wise, as far as this is a concept the kids are having difficulty with, what's another way that we can approach teaching this? I was able to provide her with that. That was a great thing too. So, I mean, being on the other side, again, you have to remember as a teacher, you are a lifelong learner. You are always going to add to your toolbox.
Say that one more time for the people in the back.
You have to be a lifelong learner. Man. You have to always add to your toolbox, and you have to understand your toolbox has to be bottomless because you're going to constantly be putting things in there. And also be comfortable, and this was something I learned as well from mentors and from my colleagues, everything is not going to work the first time.
Yeah.
And it's all right to scrap it and try something new. But when you find something new, you make sure that you don't keep it close to the cuff. You share that because it could help another teacher. So resources within your school, identify best you can everything that's available to you there. Talk to your principal. Talk to the director of operations for your building. Some other things we can pursue. What avenues could we chase down to extend this program or, to make it easier for us to do this? And then if you don't have those resources in your school, then you need to, again, surf the internet, ask Alexa, talk to Google. It's out there. It's out there. But again, that all goes into planning. This is not something that you're going to do overnight.
Sure.
That's another thing I would tell myself. Don't be overwhelmed. And I tell my kids this all the time in math class. You approach a problem like you approach an extra large pizza. You eat it slice by slice.
That's it.
Do not overwhelm yourself or do not become overwhelmed looking at a problem that is too big. Even, just like a word problem in math or a passage in English, you break it down.
That's it.
And that's what you have to do. And you have to understand that your first year, your second year will be better than your first year. Your third year will be better than your second year. And your fourth year will be better, than your third year. And that all comes from constantly building and constantly adding to your toolbox. And eventually you'll be running on all cylinders, but never get comfortable, never get complacent, because no two children learn the same. No 2 years where you have the same students, even if you actually physically have
the same students. That's right.
The summer can change a child in a way that you could never imagine. So you have to understand that a child evolves. The type of children you're going to teach will evolve. So if that's going to happen, you have to also be comfortable in evolving. You cannot stay stagnant. You cannot say, oh, well, I was evaluated as a highly effective teacher last year. You could be identified as a developing teacher the next. You can never become complacent. You have to always hone your craft. You have to pursue the professional development. You have to continue to engage in dialogue. You have to continuously become aware of the environment that you work in and the population that you serve. And I want to say that again, the population that you serve. As an educator, you are a servant to your students.
Yes, sir. Yes,
you
sir.
are a servant to your students, and you have to be mindful of that. Every day you walk into the classroom, you are staring into the future. And if you do not realize that, your missteps can be detrimental.
Man, you're dropping some knowledge right here, man. And I think that journey of growth, especially that bottomless toolbox. I love that analogy, and it makes it crystal clear the scope of what you have to understand about your growth as an educator, man. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
So we're gonna switch gears here for a second. I'm gonna throw some rapid fire questions at you. If I were to walk into the building and see Mr. McNeil's students, how would they describe you?
He's tough. He's loving. He's corny. He's funny. He's cool. And he's swaggy.
There you go. Nice. Okay, so tell me about this. What was maybe just a bad experience for you in the classroom? What was maybe like one of your low points in the classroom as an educator? And I'm assuming maybe it was something towards the beginning when you didn't have that toolbox. What was that low for you?
Actually, it happened right around the time, maybe 4 years in. I was teaching a child, and she was having a bit of difficulty, and her grandmother was not accepting that it was the child. She was trying to place it more so on my shoulders. And, I was trying to do my best, showing her the data, trying to explain to her what the situation was. But also at the same time, I accept my responsibility in this because I'm a stakeholder. But I also, I felt she needed to be made aware of how she was a stakeholder and what she needs to do to hold herself accountable. And that was probably one of the most difficult times, because it was one of my first times really having to sit in the office with my principal and a parent in that manner. And having to, in essence, tell a parent about herself. And having to try to, be very selective and careful of my wording, and not to be judgmental,
right?
But to be understanding, but still, again, firm, but flexible.
I tell you, that reminds me, because I know I got challenged like that one time, and in my mind, I'm sitting there. What you're not gonna do is tell me how to do my job. That's what I'm thinking in my mind. But you can't say that, so I'm with you. So how did you, in that situation, that was a low for you? It sounds like you felt like you were being challenged, but how'd you come out on the other side of that?
I mean, and even to speak to what you just said, the mindset that we have is the mindset the parent has as well.
True.
And that's where, again, you have to take that inventory of yourself. And I mean, from that experience, one, I learned to improve my parent communication. And that's something, too, that I haven't spoken to. And I'll just say now, parent communication is important. And parent communication must be even keel. It cannot be lopsided. You must contact parents when their kids are succeeding, man, as much as you contact parents when their kids are struggling.
I don't think people understand the value of that, man.
They don't. And in all honesty, that helps the parent look at you through a completely different lens. If your only phone call is to complain about a child, you are now distancing and pushing away an ally that you need. Because if the parent starts to undermine you in the home, you've lost that child. because the child will embody what their parent says about you at home. And if their parent doesn't respect you, then the child is not going to respect you, because no matter how you cut the pie, the parent puts the food on the table, the roof overhead.
Mm-hmm.
So that you are never going to be able to challenge that.
That's a losing battle. Yeah.
That's a losing battle. So you need to make sure that you make sure that you communicate with your parents on a regular basis. And again, with all of the technology that we have, a text message, an Instagram post of their child succeeding is a great thing. Email, it's FaceTime. We don't always have to have you come to the building. We can handle this right now with all of us in the room, but you being at your office.
Right.
So communicate with your parents. And from that's what I really gathered. And I really started to campaign on. And I can definitely say my greatest experiences as an educator have been in situations where my parents knew me. They knew the place where I was coming from. They knew my heart. They knew my investment in their child. They knew that I was going to hold their child to a certain level of expectation, as well as myself and as well as the parents. I always talk about the tripod, the stakeholders involved, the school and the parents and the student. We all have to be held accountable. And if all the stakeholders are not involved, we're failing that child. So
nice. Last one. What's the funniest thing that happened to you in the classroom?
I cursed inadvertently. And when it came out, I laughed out loud because I thought to myself that I just accidentally really let that slip. And it wasn't a malicious instant. It was more so of my reaction to something. And the kids stopped dead in their tracks. Looked at me, and I looked at them, and I was just like, my bad. I apologize. I was taken aback like you were. So please forgive me. So yes, that was probably one of the funniest things, that because I literally laughed out loud and had to stop for a second. And again, that goes with the flexibility. You got to embrace as a teacher when you make mistakes.
That's
and
it.
The kids have to see that. Again, it's all through modeling. If you are willing to accept your flaws and your faults as an educator, and if you are honest and able to tell your children when you drop the ball and not put it on their back, them
own it,
they'll trust you that much more as well. And they know, because I tell my kids language is inappropriate language won't be tolerated. Cell phone won't be tolerated. So, how you dress needs to be, my expectation is this. But if you're cursing in the classroom, you're on your cell phone when you should be teaching, and you come to work looking slovenly, your kids are not going to receive you. And to be honest with you, and let me not even say that, because I was always put together. But I remember when I first started teaching, it was jeans, sneakers, and button up. But as I progressed through my career, it became full suits. Because if I wanted my kings to see what a king looks like, I had to show that to them. Just like with my young ladies, if I wanted them to know how a man should treat them, I had to model that. So my boys were never allowed to walk in front of a girl. They had to hold the door. My boys always lined up at the end of the line to allow the girls to go first. And I would always have a boy open the door. It's about cultivating character, because if all you're doing is teaching content and not cultivating character, you again are doing a disservice to your kids. So, it's that modeling is very important.
It is.
And because your kids watch everything that you do, they pick up on everything that you do. So you have to be mindful of that, and you have to be aware of what they know, because if not, they could be plotting anything underneath you, and anything could be going on if you don't stay in touch with the pulse of your kids.
It's funny. I pictured what happened in that situation that you just talked about in your classroom. And it's like, I think about circumstances where something where kids might be deep in some work, or, they might be doing some group activity. So there's some noise, but it's learning noise that's happening in the classroom. And you might call somebody's attention and they don't hear you. You got to call them again. But you say the wrong thing and all of a sudden everybody has sonic hearing levels. And I think that is absolutely hilarious.
Absolutely. And they will record you.
Oh, yeah.
So you got to be mindful of that as well. Big Brother is always watching. And once you're on Snapchat, you're in the universe. Take that back. So you got to be mindful of that as well.
So now switching gears outside the classroom, what is something that you maybe do for fun, or maybe like a service that you recommend that helps you keep that work-life balance, or something that you do just in your spare time for fun?
Well, you have to, me personally, I work out. Mm-hmm. And I mean, as in anything when they talk about talented people, what are the things that talented people, successful people do? That's important, that, you take your time and have your morning routine. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Because you have to get up and go into work every day, and how your day starts will determine a lot for you.
Oh,
so
man.
You have to clear your head. You have to, one of our frat brothers once posted something that said, I never understood what a friend of mine meant when he said sleep with a purpose.
Sleep with a purpose. Yes, sir.
So you have to disconnect from the world like you expect your kids to. You have to disconnect from the world before you go to bed, and you have to meditate on what it is that you want to do, what your goals are for the next day. And then in the morning, you have to also calibrate yourself. Mm-hmm. And I believe meditation before you go to sleep and when you wake up in the morning is vital. Working out is definitely necessary. I like to draw, so I definitely lose myself in that. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I'm a gamer. I'm not gonna lie, I consider Madden sometimes to be the new age chess.
Got you.
As related to technology. So sometimes I'll beat the game up. You have to have an outlet. So
sure.
I definitely say those things are things that I like to do, as well as cooking. Whatever your passion is, whatever is something that literally puts a smile on your face. If it's reading a book, then make sure you carve out time every day to read. If it's taking a walk during your lunch break, you got to step away from it. Mm-hmm. At times. Have to step away from it, but it has to be something that's consistent, that mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually you look forward to, because it will reinvigorate your process as an educator. That downtime will be when you are most creative. Write those things down too as well. Mm-hmm. Like that's something I have to say. One of my greatest professors, while I was in my education program, Dr. Bonner, she is a beast at Howard. Mm-hmm. And she's recognized because she was also principal of Banneker High School in Washington, D.C., one of our premier independent schools. And she used to make us journal as part of our program. We had to journal our teaching experiences week to week. And that allows you to reflect. And I was like, this has got to be the worst assignment ever when I first started. As I started to really do it, and I mean really do it, not just, well, let me just write down Billy did this in class, blah, 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 but really reflect on what I was doing. It helps you, again, take that honest inventory of yourself and hold yourself accountable and think about what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. Because if you're not assessing yourself as an educator, again, and I keep going back to this,
it's important.
You'll be doing a disservice to your kids.
That's it.
Because, at the end of the day, again, you need to evolve. If you are stagnant, if you are rigid, if you don't think outside the box or allow yourself to step outside your comfort zone, then you're setting yourself up for failure.
I'm going to go ahead and drop the mic right there. That's wow. This is definitely one of those episodes that it just threw a lot at you. And you might have to go back and listen to it for a second or a third or maybe even a fourth time just to get all those nuggets of wisdom and really digest some of that information, because I'm trying to tell you, I would have paid any amount of money to have had some of this, even some of this knowledge when I first began as a teacher. And here it is here for you. And you could tell that he was passionate. You probably heard it in the background, but he was clapping his hands. You know somebody's passionate. You know they're passionate when they're clapping their hands. And he's a passionate educator, and I love him for it. I want to thank Mr. Jason McNeil for his time and this wisdom that he imparted on us. If you enjoyed what you heard, come visit us, urbanandeducating.com. We have a great community. Follow us, facebook.com/urbaneducating, and also follow us on Twitter and Instagram @urbaneducating. You can also visit our YouTube channel, Urban and Educating, that has some great inspirational, motivational videos for you to help you flourish in the classroom. Until next time.
Thank you for listening. Visit our website at urbanandeducating.com and subscribe to the show on iTunes and Google Play.